Hey everyone, today we are going to try and do a repair job on this rigid saw, and the saw part itself actually is working just fine. The problem is the base. You can see it is sitting rather crooked. So what the problem is when they built this saw, you can see they put let me get around here. You can see they put a little guard here that they turned into one of the back feet, and that's a welded strip that's in there, and it's designed to prevent sparks from shooting out from underneath the saw when you cut it or are cutting with it. But the problem is, I gotta pick this thing up here. The problem we have is when originally, and they've fallen off since then, you can see these bolt holes in the bottom of the saw, and there's only 3 of them, and then you have the guard that they put in with the welded leg in. So what was here originally was these rubber legs that were like these little 2-inch pieces of rubber, circular pieces of rubber that bolted in to these holes. And this is an older saw, and over time the rubber deteriorated and it just crumbled away into pieces, and so now the saw sits all crooked. And so what I want to try to do today is take the welder and weld some new legs onto this thing, so when the saw sits down it sits straight again. Because excuse me for the currently, when you sit it on the ground, this is how it sits, because 3 legs have fallen off and 1 is a permanently welded leg. So what we're gonna do is, I got this piece of scrap gas line that from when I changed out a hot water heater recently, and I'm gonna cut this into pieces to the right length, and then we're gonna weld it to the bottom of this thing and see if we can't get it to sit straight again. So let's get to work. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting off the end of the pipe. I don't know if you guys saw it on camera, but it was a threaded pipe, and I just wanted to remove the threads. And then the reason I'm taking the pipe back out of the saw is because I am going to grab my grinder here, and what I'm doing is I'm deburring the end of the tube. Sometimes when you cut with an abrasive saw, it will leave sharp edges on the edge of the tube, and I'm just trying to remove them, and so when you're handling the material you don't cut yourself. And the other thing I'm doing right here is, these pipes have a finish on them that's like a dark black coating, and that's not good to weld on top of. What that is I've heard it called different things, but it's just a finish that they put on it, usually from the steel mill, and it's just not good to weld on. It's dirty, and if I could give you one piece of advice for welding in the future, anyone who isn't an experienced welder, would be clean the material. Welding does not like to go across dirt or paint or grease. So if you're going to weld some material, what you want to do is clean it as the best you can. You know, get all the rust off it, get all the dirt off it, any paint, any grease, any sort of finishing that they put on it, powder coating, whatever. But that's all I'm doing right here, is I'm just deburring the tube, and then I'll get my little combo square out here, and I'm just marking it with a little piece of soapstone. The dimensions for the pieces were 1 3/4 inches, so I'm just marking 1 3/4 inches on the pipe, and then I'm gonna cut it again, deburr it again, and it's easier to deburr it when it's in a longer piece, so that's why you see me keep taking it in and out of the saw, just to handle the material, because you'll see when I cut them and I got to deburr the other side, they're really short, and you got to kind of hold them in the tip of your fingers. Is a little bit dangerous. But that's all I'm doing right here, is I'm just cutting these tubes down to 1 3/4 inches, deburring them and removing the coating off the tube for better welding. And then also I kind of made a little mistake here. One of the things you'll see that I'm doing is I'm rolling the tube, and that's why I have it on this board so I can roll it at an angle. Is my background and experience is working in industrial settings with thicker materials, larger materials, more powerful equipment. And what I'm doing right now is I'm putting weld prep on the tube. And so if you are familiar with that, that's basically what I'm doing is I'm putting a bevel on the end of the tube. So when you join it up to your welding surface, you have an area for the weld to sit in. And I'm just so used to doing high pressure and larger material that you didn't need to do the bevel on these. And what ended up happening once I started welding is I made the material of the pipe a little too thin, and so I blew a couple holes in it. And so then you'll see me when I'm welding, I'll go back and kind of hit one little area again, because I thinned the wall so much that when I was welding on it, it blew through it. I mean, it worked fine. It stuck to the saw and it's fused on there, but I probably went a little overboard on my weld prep. But that's just how I'm used to working, is weld prep and everything. So, but that's all we're watching here is just me cutting the parts and doing the weld prep on the little legs. And then you're probably wondering, well, you said the saw was broken, and why are you using it? Well, I'm right now, you can't see it, but I've got a little piece of 2x6 stuck under the other side of it so I can continue to use it before we make the repairs. So and just doing a little bit more weld prep here, that's all. And it was kind of a strange job because you needed 3 legs, so and again, you can see it on the back corner of that saw, or the back side of that saw, or the side facing the camera. There's a little metal plate there, and that's just to prevent sparks from shooting out. It's kind of like spark control, I guess. But you know, just removing the coating again, and you'll see the tubes get shiny, and that's what you want to see. You want shiny, clean metal whenever you're going to do welding. And I know you're not going to be in a situation where you can always clean the metal, and you can weld over dirty stuff that's just not going to be pretty, and you may not get the best penetration on your weld bead there. But I know you get in situations where you're welding on a car or a tool or a piece of equipment that might be painted that you can't grind off, and that's just part of welding. You're going to come across things that are difficult to deal with, and you got to find a way to knock it out. And they're just gonna go ahead and cut the final piece here, and then I'll deburr them, the other sides of them, because I could only do one side at a time as I'm cutting them off. I'll do the other side while holding them in my fingers. So alright, that is all the cutting that we'll need, so we can go ahead and start welding on the saw. Now I went to get my welding gloves to kind of protect my fingers a little bit, but you see what I'm talking about. I'm just deburring the other side that's going to be touching the ground when it's welded to the saw, and I'm just trying to take any sharp edges off it and make it a little safer. So here's a close-up look at the feet I'm going to weld onto the saw, and you can see the beveling I did on the edge of the tube, and that shouldn't have been done. It wasn't necessary. It was a little bit of overkill, but it ended up causing me problems actually in the long run. So what I'm doing in this little part is, this is the bottom of the saw that you're looking at, and I'm grinding the paint off. And again, it goes back to, you want your weld surface to be clean so you get a good clean weld. But I know it looks like I'm grinding them really a lot, but I'm really being very gentle, and it's a thin material that I'm welding on, and I'm being very light with the grinder just to remove the paint. And sometimes it smears a little bit. You kind of got to work it until you see shiny metal. So that's what I'm doing here. Alright, so here's a close-up of what the grinding I was doing, and you can see how the metal is shiny and clean, and where I'm removing the paint for the weld surface. So, and now here, what I'm doing is I have the saw flipped upside down and clamped to the table, and what I'm doing is grinding some more paint off of one of the center supports, and I'm doing that to install the ground clamp. And now I'm putting the first leg on, and I'm trying to clamp the leg into position so it doesn't move once I start welding it, because you can have the heat draw it, or just if you hit it the wrong way, you might knock it. But I just try to avoid welding things while I'm holding them with my fingers if I can. I know sometimes you can't get around it, and I just try to avoid doing that. So I want the clamp to hold the leg into position, and then you can weld it and you don't have to worry about it moving. And just giving it a little tap to kind of center it on the part where the leg goes. And I'm doing this all by eyeball. I'm not measuring or anything. I'm just kind of looking at the round surface on the bottom of the saw and trying to line up the leg. And this is why I was grinding the paint. I'm going to put the ground clamp, and you want to have your ground clamp as close to the work that you're doing or where you're going to be welding to just get the best results. But also, I'm sure some of you have said to yourself already that have a little more experience, you're not supposed to weld on a tool with an electric motor. And I understand that, and I did a little bit of research beforehand because I wasn't totally sure. And when you go online and start researching things like what to do and what not to do, you're going to find opinions on both sides of it. So I found, doing just a little bit of internet research, I found some people saying, do not do this, you'll destroy the machine because of the electrical parts. And then I saw other people saying that you can do it, it's fine, it's not going to hurt anything. But we'll find out here at the end, and I'll give it a final test and we'll see. But that's all I'm doing right now, is just running a little tiny bead along the edge of this thing, and I'm starting to figure out that, man, I shouldn't have put that bevel on that tube, because I'm just blowing right through it. I made it too thin. But again, it stuck to the saw. I got good fusion most of the way around, but This isn't something that's going to be under a lot of pressure or anything like that. I just need the legs to stay on there, so I'm not real worried about the little bit of blow through I had on the welding. It's okay. It'll hold, and then you'll see later here in a second, I run another pass over it, and I'm just trying to kind of fill that hole up a little bit. Here we go. Yeah, this is me trying to fill the hole here on the first one I welded. And it just got to the point where it started getting a little bit messy, so I just, instead of just pouring weld after weld onto this thing to plug the hole completely, I just kind of moved on to the next one. It was on there, it's strong, it's not moving, so I was content with the results, so I just kept moving on. Alright, you can see I'm going to repeat the process again, and it's a little easier on this side because there's that little bar you see going across this that was kind of getting in my way, that the ground clamp is connected to. That was a little bit tricky, but the other two on the other side, they're on the front of the saw, they're wide open, so you can just slide the clamp right under there, clamp it down. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to tap it into position. I kind of tighten the clamp and the piece on there to where it's loosely tight. I kind of tap it into position where I really want it with the hammer, then I tighten the clamp down a little more so it stays. So if you see me handling a brick there, if you're wondering what that's all about, sometimes when you're welding with a stick electrode, sometimes they get a little like crusty part on the end after it's done melting, and it kind of prevents you from being able to strike an arc because the metal part is kind of like coated over due to the way the flux melted around when you pulled away your last time. And so one of the tricks some people do is they'll get something that's not grounded, that's hard, that you can tap the end of the electrode on, and it kind of breaks the little coating off the end of the stick, and then you can, when you go to strike your arc, it's easier because that little coating will prevent, you'll sit there and you'll be tapping and nothing's happening. You're kind of wondering why. Well, that could be one of the reasons why. Is it's kind of hard to explain, but it just gets like a sealed over coating once it cools down, and it just won't strike an arc. So, but that's why I keep a brick on the table. I can tap that out. But here I'm just trying to show you guys the bottom of the saw after I'm done welding, and admittedly I probably shouldn't put these welds on YouTube. They didn't come out really great, but they served my purpose. I just wanted those legs to be welded on. I didn't need it to be pretty, I just needed it to be functional. And here I just wanted to show you guys that it sits level now, it's sitting clean and flat, and of course there's Molly dog walking into my shot, but that's okay. And she wants to know what's going on with the saw too. But
hey, Molly,
I'm just showing you how it came out, and that it's sitting flat and level now, which is
hey, girl,
what the goal was. So and then of course, you know, I wanted to test it because I just welded on a tool with an electric motor, and it did continue to work for me. I have heard that in the past, that some machinery, like you know, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, maybe like a motorcycle or a jet ski, you don't want to weld on those, anything with an electric motor in it, like this saw. You can do damage to the machine if the current goes to the wrong places. So one of the ways to avoid this is just get your ground clamp as close to where you're welding as you can, and the current will hopefully not pass through your electrical parts. So, but I just had to test the machine. I just welded on it, and it still does work. It still cuts, and I'm very happy with that. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, thanks for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.